And I have water now instead of whiskey. So we'll see how this goes. I don't feel drunker, but we're going to find out. Welcome to X-Men Evolution.
Leave that in. For the love of God, leave that in as the start of the recording.
Welcome to X-Men Evolution, Episode 2 of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men animated recap podcast. I'm Rod. I think I'm sober, which is the best kind of drunk. And I'm also a musician. You can look me up on all the socials and music stuff.
And I'm JC, and I have a surprise for Rod because we talked about what are some of the bonus episodes we have coming up for this show. And they are Rod reading for the first time X-Men #1.
Oh, nice. Oh,
I found a reprint copy of it at my comic book store. So this is Rod. Sorry, I'm not buying you the original, but it is the original X-Men #1, followed by the Jim Lee X-Men #1.
Oh, nice.
So there will be a future episode that Rod is finding out about as we're speaking, where it's him reacting to those original X-Men comics.
And it's official. I see my name on the sticky note.
Yeah, on the Post-it note, so you know it's legit.
Wait, so am I reading these like while we're recording?
No, God, no.
That'd be hilarious.
That could be TikTok content. We don't want to ruin our entire podcast feed.
Yeah. There you go. If I say anything inflammatory, then at least people can stitch it.
Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series. We're going back and watching every single X-Men animated episode that we could find, along with various other bonus episodes of X-Men people in non-X-Men cartoons. Our first series started with the original 1992 X-Men the Animated Series, which was building up to the release of X-Men 97, which was hopefully coming to Disney Plus later this year. We'll find out. But since it is not here yet, we needed to find some other stuff to fill the next at least 6 months of our lives.
And there's plenty of stuff to fill it with.
Yeah, Rod and I put a spreadsheet together of like, okay, how much left do we have? And there's a lot.
The only kind of hope that I have is that we don't make it to the X-Men movies, or no one cares what I have to really say about them. Because I'm not kind to those movies.
So those movies we're going to watch when drunk and in person. So
that's great.
Only way that's going to happen, right?
Yeah. And
2 Phoenix sagas.
Yeah. I just had a conversation with my brother about this because my brother was like, I just rewatched the animated Phoenix saga. I was like, yeah, I told the showrunner and writer themselves, personally, that they did it like perfectly twice, and some of the movies fucked it up twice.
I think in real time, that is the clip I have ready to go live tomorrow.
Nice. All right. So by now, you see how that went for me.
Rod's TikTok is just decimated with angry comments, and it's perfect.
It's great.
Yep.
So some quick reminders. We're a recap show about a series that started over 20 years ago, which still blows my mind that in my mind, this is a new show.
You're right.
It's still 2 decades old. There will be spoilers. If you don't want spoiled for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode, and come back. And we'll do our best to not spoil future episodes that haven't been covered yet, but we honestly just don't know what's happening anymore, especially now because this is the second of a 2-batch episode thing we're recording. So we literally don't know what happens next.
I think I should probably take that out of our run of show for future episodes because it's kind of redundant at this point because, to Rod's point, neither of us have ever watched Evolution. So this isn't like the nostalgia of 92 where we're re-experiencing it. We're literally experiencing Evolution for the first time.
Yeah, because we were talking on the first episode that both of us were in college, or at least late high school, early college for this. So we just had other shit going on.
Yep.
And this was before it was cool to be into geek culture and watch stuff. And I think even just our age at the time, you're in that area where cartoons are for babies,
yeah,
stuff.
Sadly.
So, I don't know if it's that way anymore. Hopefully not. But
I feel like there's so many cartoons out, and then to age this podcast, this is the week that Across the Spider-Verse came out. Mm-hmm. There was nobody in that theater who was under the age of 17. It was adults who were all loving the hell out of that movie. I think for the most part, that animation stigma has gone away.
Yeah,
so.
Which also, if you haven't seen Across the Spider-Verse, it is probably a perfect movie. It is
fucking
so
amazing.
Good. I'm not even probably. I thought it was a perfect movie, but I think you will as well. Even if you don't know anything about Spider-Man, which I don't know how you don't if you've been alive for more than 3 years, but it was so good. I can't even communicate how wild that. Did you hear that one scene where they're doing the chase across the Council of Spider-Man or whatever
the Future City? Yeah.
Yeah, that took 4 years. And
I believe it.
It shows.
Yeah.
Also, another cool fun fact that has nothing to do with X-Men, we're going to mention anyway. The mild
Lego?
spoiler, I guess. Yeah, the Lego thing.
Yes.
Like the Lego scene was like animated by a 14-year-old YouTuber
who had recreated one of the trailers or something
Yeah.
like that, and that's why they let him do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you hear the interview with those guys where they?
No, I didn't.
So they said that they saw the trailer remake and they were like, that's really cool. And it was so late in the production process, they were like, could we even do it? And they asked the studio, and the studio was like, yeah, sure, if you can get it done. So the kid did that whole thing while he was on spring break, and then did revisions once he was back in school after finishing his homework.
Good for him.
Right? I barely made it through school. I can't even imagine like working on a like blockbuster like Marvel film. Anyway,
Yeah.
back to X-Men. We're currently not sponsored or affiliated with Marvel Animation, Disney, or Disney Plus in any way.
Don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you found this somehow, make sure to follow us on whatever podcast service is best for you. We're on all of them. And if you want to support the show, we do have affiliate links in all of our uploads now. We are going to make sure that list of affiliate stuff will also include stuff from X-Men Evolution. But we have a lot of really great stuff from X-Men 92, so I'm not going to remove any of that.
Yeah, those books by the Lee Walds are gold. Now onto the show. Today we're going to be talking about Season 1, Episode 2, titled The X Impulse, which even after watching, I don't understand. But maybe I'll have some enlightenment.
No, before we even get to the aired on date or the IMDb, I do not understand the titling for these episodes yet. I do not get it yet.
If it's a pun, someone needs to explain it to me, or like a dad joke or something.
I mean, I hate puns, so it's entirely possible like there's something I'm ignoring, but yeah.
Yeah, because initially I read it as like the X Pulse or something like that. They're just like replacing like beginning sounds, but that doesn't make sense either. Anyway, it aired on November 11th, 2000, and currently sits at a 7.0 star rating on IMDb. So this is a little bit lower than the first episode.
Only by like 0.1 though, wasn't it? It was 7.1 on the last one.
But the last one we said was like kind of low for X-Men in general.
Well, just it was average for cartoons at the time.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, like cartoons from that era, if you were not like the best thing on all TV, like a 7 was a very good and respectable number.
Yeah.
And I think it also shows like some of the shows that were written for like kids would be lower ratings because adults are the ones who would go back and rate them on IMDb, and it's like,
oh, that's true. You'd have to have internet access once
exactly
unsupervised. So
it feels like a Buffy episode, you know.
You know, that's so. I feel like I'm going to be missing a whole bunch of context from this show because I've heard a lot of Buffy references, or people say that there's a lot of Buffy references in this, and I never watched that show.
Well, you're dead inside.
You're right. I caught little things like is it Angel that had a spin-off show?
Angel had a spin-off show,
and stuff like that. And obviously I know Sarah Michelle Gellar and stuff, but I don't know enough about the actual lore of the show to know like if you're referencing it in this.
It's funny that we're mentioning like the spin-offs because Charisma Carpenter, who was a character in Angel and originated in Buffy, there was something that posted on Instagram today that was quote unquote confirmed. I didn't see the source on it, but it was confirmed that the likeness of Jean Grey was inspired by Charisma Carpenter.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
There you go. Do they owe people like stuff for that after the fact when they admit it? Because we have a mutual friend, Claire Max, that it's been confirmed that there's animators that are comics like illustrators that have like modeled their characters after her. I
mean, I guess it's a matter of if it's inspired by or literally like a copy paste.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like if they came out with a character whose name was Claire and had the pink hair and stuff, that might be a little harder to argue against.
And looks like she could snap you with her pinky finger.
She could crush you, Rod.
Right. It's a lot of people. Definitely me, but a lot of people. Like that. We've been watching Claire in real time over the last maybe 4 years or so. Like just
something like that. Yeah.
Really, I mean, she's always been into fitness and stuff, but like just really accelerated. It's insane. It's a really cool way.
Even if you didn't know it was her, go look up Claire Max on Instagram or Twitter, and you will have seen her picture in the geek sphere as being like she could be a barbarian in the next Dungeons and Dragons movie. So.
Yeah, and wasn't there a character in Arcane that was like very similar? That, like I think a lot of people did a side by side. I don't watch that show or a game or whatever it is.
I know that she cosplayed as that character. I don't know what the connection was prior to that. But
Gotcha. All right.
But X-Men.
Anyway, yeah, this show. First note here is whatever the opening scene. This opening scene.
The cold open.
Yeah, the cold open. The music that they use. I don't care enough about it to go actually double check, but it sounds like they either reuse music from the 92 animated series, or this composer is like, we're going to get as close to that nostalgia as possible, because it was so similar. Like, just to the transition music.
I actually didn't look up who the studio was behind any of this, so I don't think there's a Saban connection on this one, which probably, reflective in the quality of the animation
that's why
having budget, but there are no happy Saban kids at the end of the episode.
Yes.
So I doubt it was the same music from that series.
Yeah, it was just so similar, but also that might have just been, it's kind of like tropes in the time and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. I actually, overall, before we get into like what actually happens in this cold open, I really liked this cold open. It was dramatic and interesting, apart from being animated and stuff. So like it opens up on like a residential house, and inside the house they zoom in, and I only knew it was Kitty Pryde because of the description and the thumbnail said it was her, but Kitty Pryde's like sleeping.
Well, and we also did see in the previous episode's animated intro, they do call out that it's Kitty, right. And you could see you could see the face there. So.
Yeah. And she's asleep. I don't know if it's still a trope, but at the time it was a trope where like you fall asleep reading, and then the wind blows through the window, and like just the pages of the book on her bed flip through.
I've never fallen asleep with the window open like that. Right. So
I do, only because I live on a hill and I like the air, but I don't sleep with books open.
That's because you don't fall asleep with books,
right? It would be hilarious if this book was also Origin of Species, like Xavier used,
signed by Charles Darwin,
right? But it kind of segues into this dream sequence she's having. This was one of my favorite parts because it takes something that we've all experienced and makes it much worse. She's like flying and then very quickly just starts falling. And I think that's something that, I don't even say most people, I think everyone that's been alive to some extent has had that night. You have never fallen in your dream?
I have never had the falling nightmare.
Really?
I've had the in high school and can't remember my locker combination. I've had the like need to yell and nothing comes out. I've had the running and you're like in quicksand, so you literally can't go faster. I've never had the falling nightmare, which I know is weird because it's such a common trope in, like, not even trope, but experience for people.
I mean, that you're fortunate then, because it is genuinely one of the most terrifying things, because you don't have any control.
I mean, I've literally had night terrors where you wake up and it's like the sleep paralysis demon and stuff like that. Yeah. But I've never had the falling.
So fun. Not that, we need another tangent, 13 minutes in, but
welcome to this fucking show, right. Rod.
Yeah. You're in the second chapter of this show, so you know what you're in for.
Yeah.
Unless you just discovered us, then welcome.
If you discovered us because of X-Men Evolution SEO, you missed some shit.
Yeah. So when I was in college, between my freshman and sophomore year, I was with a group of students that went to Connecticut for like a summer program thing. Yeah, right. And there was a few days, like maybe a week, where we weren't in our residence yet. So we were just staying with families of people that were in our group of students. And so all the guys would stay in one house and all the girls stayed in another house. And the guys, it was funny because this was still like, early 2000s where it was still taboo to share rooms with other guys and stuff. It was weird. Anyway, but they only had like 3 air mattresses and like 8 guys. So we just all decided to like suck it up, and we just pushed all the air mattresses together, and 8 of us just like, you spread across them as evenly
it's
as
like
possible.
Fucking Charlie and the Chocolate Factory with the grandparents, basically.
Kinda, yeah, except we didn't alternate. We weren't smart like that.
Okay.
But we were just all there. And so the next morning, I don't even know, like one of the mornings, the girls came over and they could see us through the window. So they like knocked on the window, and I wasn't awake yet. So this is up until this point is just from what everybody else told me. They knocked on the window and it startled the guy that was sleeping right next to me. So he like jumped up, and because we were on air mattresses, when he landed back down on it,
it popped you up.
Me up into the air.
Good.
I don't necessarily know how far, but enough that I had that night terror where I was falling, and then when I woke up, I was actually falling.
Good.
And it was enough height that I was airborne and then impacted back down onto the air mattress. And I wasn't hurt afterwards because it was an air mattress, but I think part of me is like permanently scarred from having a night terror come true to a small extent.
I was going to say, is this now just like the most traumatic episode of the X-Men ever for you?
Right.
Aside from us like breaking down during graduation day in X-Men 92?
So anyway, aside from that, so it's just funny. I don't know how many other people have actually fallen when they are dreaming they're falling.
No, that's it. I've heard about people like rolling off of their bed, but you were literally flying.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, Kitty is falling in her dream off like a skyscraper or something after flying.
Yeah, she was flying through. It looked like New York City.
Yeah. She's falling, and then it goes past the point, because normally when you have these, and this is weird that I can explain this to you because you don't know the experience, but like usually you're falling, and then shortly before the impact, you just wake up in cold sweats, and it's over at least, and then you're just on your. This took that it's almost like Final Destination, where it takes it to like the worst possible extreme besides actually dying. And so she's falling, but she doesn't wake up, or she wakes up while falling, and then it even takes it further than what I went through, where she just wakes up in the basement below her bedroom. The voice actor there did a fantastic job of communicating the terror of that. Like, you could tell like a part of her knew that she actually fell, and it wasn't just like she sleepwalked and then woke up in another room or something.
Yeah.
And then her parents, run down because they're hearing her 15-year-old daughter scream from the basement. She's like, I fell, and I fell through the ceiling, and I don't know how it happened and stuff. And was it the mother that was like, oh, you're just having a night terror or whatever? And then the dad
it was like, are you sure you're not sleepwalking?
Yeah. Which is fair, because this is another fun thing. In my 20s and part of my early 30s, I was a heavy sleepwalker, which was fun for my roommates. But it's just a different feeling. And then the dad looks up at the ceiling, he's like, I don't think it was sleepwalking. And you see the half a pillow and the bed sheets or comforter are phased through the ceiling.
Well, you actually get the quick alert from Cerebro that pops in saying that there's a second detection. They complete the ID, know that it's Kitty. And they give the age that she's from Northbrook, so we know it's a different city than where they are. And then it cuts back, and you see the sheets are not just hanging from the ceiling; they are fused through the floor. Oh yeah, and everybody freaks the fuck out.
And so a nice detail that they actually paid attention to in Evolution that wasn't necessarily something they would do in '92. Like in '92, if there was a computer screen, they'd be like just IKEA furniture or whatever. And
it was literally a shopping list for IKEA.
Right? In this one, it was I could tell that they were in Chicago because when the map zoomed in, I recognized the region, or the Great Lakes and stuff. But that cold open, I might put up in one of my top 10 best animated cold open things. That was so intriguing. And I know Kitty Pryde already, but I feel like even knowing her, it's still a really exciting opening. And if you didn't know her, that has to be such an intriguing, thrilling, what the fuck just happened? And then they cut into the theme song.
Yeah, Professor calls for the Blackbird, and it jumps right into the theme song.
And after the intro picks up on the human cloaked, or the skin Nightcrawler.
Nightcrawler as a skin.
Skin, yeah. And
if you have any problem with our phrasing, hit up Max No Sleeves, who came up with the not offensive but sounds offensive phrase, being a skin.
He's running late to class, which I always love. I know maybe this is just the old man in me / 90s kid. I love when they juxtapose a superpowered character with something they should be on top of and not. So you have the one character we've met so far that can teleport, and he's
the latest to everything. Yeah, it's like the ongoing joke about Barry Allen as the Flash. Barry is the one person who shouldn't be late to anything, but is late to everything.
But the principal is waiting at the door to yell at him, and I think he says I'm sorry. Was it Principal Darkholm?
Yep, that's the first time we get the full acknowledgement on the name.
Which, if you weren't already signaled by the animation style that this was a villain, there was a movie or something or a TV show that was this character's name is Dr. Evil Person. I wonder if they're the secret bad guy after all of this. But this was another trope I kind of loved, where we're in a high school setting, so they just take characters we already know and insert them into normal positions. So the principal's the literal villain.
I mean, it's what would later become the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, where nobody knows that the principal is actually the big bad for one of the seasons.
Yeah, and as a kid,
also that was in Buffy too. One of the seasons was the principal was the big bad.
And I think as a kid, especially as a teenager that hated high school and stuff, that felt relatable in a parallel sense, where it's they're just out to get me, And this show gave you they're literally out to get you,
right?
And Scott kind of comes to save the day. It's hey, kid.
Well, before Scott saves the day, she notices his watch, which obviously he's self-conscious about because that's how he stays under, the protective watch. But she also mentions her after-school program, which I don't know if we're going to get to this in future episodes, but is that an allusion to her having her own group or something along those lines.
Oh yeah, where she's kind of recruiting the villains and stuff.
Right. Because we do
stuff.
get something later in this episode at the very end where it's like, oh, she is doing some sort of recruitment. So
Yeah.
I that was how I interpreted like the after school group is like, you know, you guys aren't the after school special of when shit goes right. You're the special when shit goes wrong.
It's the theater kids.
Fucking theater kids, man.
Right. They're the ones probably writing these episodes, actually. That's why we always end up in the theater department.
Let's be real. They're definitely the ones who are on X-Men 97.
Right? Yes. Yeah, so then Scott comes around the corner to save the day, and he's like, hey, kid, teacher sent me to look for you, which is clearly a cop-out because nobody does that.
Yeah,
Like,
no teacher actually gives a shit enough to send another student to look for a student.
Yeah, back in Chicago, Kitty is trying to, I would say, this is so funny. This is the opposite of what normally happens. She's trying to sneak out of her house to go to school. And her mom's like, where are you going? This is such a weird backwards, maybe this was on purpose, interesting juxtaposition of like, instead of trying to like sneak out of school to play hooky, she's like,
Right.
no, I just want to go to school. And I guess we get more of this character development later where she's kind of like, almost like the valedictorian type, character.
She's good at everything except for the physical activities, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, her mom wants her to stay, and Kitty gives the really valid response where it's not just her being like bratty or petulant. She's like, okay, but then we got to talk about it, and none of you want to talk about it.
Yeah, that's true. And also, what can they do about it?
So I would say the number one thing is you start with a conversation, and then you figure out what you can do about it.
Yeah, that's true.
Because I feel like them being in denial is literally why she was like, come on, like, what am I going to do? Sit here and watch fucking Price is Right with you and not talk?
Yeah, was it Price is Right and like one of the Judge shows?
Price is Right, Judge Show, and pre-Steve Harvey Family Feud.
Yeah, and then one of the soap operas, whatever those were that were on.
I never fell into those.
I never watched them. They were just always on. But yeah, so she talks her mom into like letting her go to school, even though she's like, before dad gets here, because he definitely will say no. Like one of the 20,000 reasons why I can't have kids, because I would definitely be the parent to cave to a kid if their reasoning was sound. And
Constantly.
And would not be able to like stand up to my partner to defend the situation.
Also, I don't know if this was intentional. The mom seemed high to me.
Fair. Yeah, because it zoomed in on her face and it just lingered a little too long.
Just something with the way like she was carrying herself. I really thought she was high as fuck. She was self-medicating suburban mom.
What's your reaction when you just see your kids bedding phase through the floor?
And well, that's the thing is it's not even like the phase through. Like it'd be one thing if you saw it go all the way through, but it's stuck there. Like you cannot logic that out.
Yeah, I kind of, in addition to like what you said about her probably being self-medicated, just they still seem shaken, which I feel like in a lot of these animated shows, everybody gets over things really quickly. Now that I'm old enough to have friends that had kids and stuff, and I've been around everybody, like, man, I just always think like these kids don't know like how often their parents are like high or drunk while all the shit is going down. But then I would like realize, wait, were my uncles and aunts, were they also high while we were? That makes so much sense now, but you just don't think about it because you're a kid and they don't tell you. And so maybe it was or wasn't intentional in this show, but I would believe it if one of the writers was like, yeah, we just made it so that mom got like rolled a J that morning to take the edge off things. And
I feel like she's more of a pill popper, but that's just me. Yeah. I don't see Kitty's mom rolling a J.
Yeah, but she was coerced into letting her go, and then there was probably an argument between Kitty's parents after she left.
But she's so high she doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Jean and Xavier are talking in the Blackbird. And Jean actually has a really good question. She's like, why is it just me and not everybody else? Xavier's like, because I'm an old bald man and we have to recruit a 15-year-old girl. So I'm getting the... So
his actual phrasing is you're the model of what a student would be. Rod's interpretation is if I show up by myself, I'm going to look like a pervert.
Yeah. Which I think both are valid.
I agree with you.
Are we getting the vibe that Jean is more of like a senior or something in high school? She's at least older.
At the very least, her and Scott are juniors because in this episode we see Scott driving.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I want to get the impression that they're the same age with each other.
And so she kind of just like, okay, whatever, you're the... She makes a joke like, I'm missing my midterms, so the thrill of midterms or whatever, which I guess I'm not even going to try to check that this is the right timing for that. And then that's where Professor Xavier reveals like, well, you go calm her down and get her, in a good space.
Yep.
I'm going to go look for this kid named Lance.
Who was in the foster system, too.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah. They actually said Lance from the foster home.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
And then that was kind of like, well, that's a little bit more sound now that there's like a couple people. It still doesn't answer Jean's question on why like only her, but you know,
Again,
at least it's two.
You're not going to bring the fuzzy blue kid.
Yeah.
Scott is probably up Schitt's Creek for still blowing up the hot dog stand in the last episode.
Yeah.
You want somebody who's the same age as Kitty, so that's why Storm didn't go. And then, I mean, if it's fucking Xavier and Wolverine, I don't think you're going to recruit anybody to go to a high school off of that. So
And so they end up at the front porch of Kitty's house, but she's at school, so it's just her parents. Her dad is actually pretty realistic in the situation. You know, I feel like usually we watch this scenario happens with like either Jean's being recruited or Xavier's recruiting some like whoever our eyes are for this episode, and the parents are like, you know what, we'll let our child decide. Like no, most parents wouldn't just let some strangers take their kid in the first visit, hopefully.
Although, let's be real, Jubilee's foster parents were like, we're going to put her in a program. Like, they were really ready to get rid of her. But other parents, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I'm saying, though, is like most parents in these shows are just like, go. And so this dad is like, what are you doing here? And how do you know our daughter?
And knows specifics without revealing how he knows them.
Yeah.
Like, again, I don't think it's an evil Xavier.
Yeah.
But it's a little more gray Xavier.
Yeah, and then Jean is like, I'm sorry, I'm sure you have a lot of questions, but if you just let us inside, we can answer all of them. And then he has the appropriate responses, like, you can answer those questions out here.
Yeah, you're not coming to my fucking house, you weirdo.
And then Xavier's not making it better because he's like, tell us about last night.
Yeah.
No social grace at all.
None.
So the parents are just like, yeah, get the fuck off our lawn.
Yeah. And Jean has a great comment. She's like, next time, can we just call people so they can hang up on us?
Right. It'll be easier. Everybody's actually really logical in this show.
I do like sassy Jean. And maybe it's just because this is Jean as a teenager. So she's in kind of like the less need to give a fuck mode. But like the Jean in 92 was a little more just like balanced, credible adult when the Phoenix wasn't making her insane.
Right, yeah.
Whereas this Jean is kind of like, I could be a little snide, but I'm also your star pupil, so you kind of have to fucking deal with it.
Yeah, right. Speaking of being her star pupil, Xavier's like, well, that didn't work. Okay, go stalk this girl at school.
Yep.
I was like, what is this man doing? He's sending these kids on missions. I think it's just a weird context knowing that everybody's in high school. I think that's just the thing that is not bad. It's just like a weird lens to think about, because in any other scenario, it's like, okay, Jean, go find this mutant that's, you know, terrorizing Paris or whatever. But this is like, hey, go follow that girl's school. So it's super interesting.
And I think a part of it where it's a little more of a cognitive dissonance for you is because you were not one of the comic book readers. Because you got to remember, those of us who, you know, even before X-Men 92, we remember that it was a school, and these were recruited as high school soldiers, effectively.
Yeah. Well, it's
so,
like kind of the trope of the 90s was like all the shows were about like child labor and child soldiers, like Power Rangers. You got teenagers and pull them out of school to fight your war in space.
Yeah. The modern version of the Power Rangers comic point blank calls that out.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, there's a character who calls out Zordon for that. It's pretty incredible.
They kind of addressed it too in that fan film that was maybe a decade ago, where it was the Dark Power Rangers. And
I don't think I saw that one, actually.
It was taken down, I think, by Saban at the time, and then enough internet buzz happened that they
not Dark Power Rangers as in evil Power Rangers, Dark Power Rangers as in gritty Power Rangers.
It was like a gritty retelling.
Oh, yeah. I know the one you're talking about, yeah.
And it was all, Power Rangers were like, when they were older, and they were like, we were recruited when we were kids. Like, you know what that does? I was like, that's pretty accurate. But then we catch up with Wolverine. He's cleaning his motorcycle, which, once again, like, is not that much of like a narrative push, but it's just like a cool way to see Wolverine. And
the only thing that tripped me out, though, was the choice of bike.
Oh, I didn't.
Because I picture Wolverine on like a Harley.
Mm-hmm.
This was definitely a more of like a Japanese street bike inspired design.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
It felt like he was on a Honda, not a Harley.
A little more sporty, kind of.
Yeah.
And maybe that was also just another aesthetic of the time, because we were in that whole like
going into the Fast and Furious era of the world and such, and everything needs to be extreme. Yeah.
I was actually just watching some YouTube documentaries about like that whole like Y2K into the Fruitiger Arrow era aesthetic, where everything was like nature but also shiny bubbles and stuff. And so maybe that was because that is definitely the show. That intro has that whole vibe of things being metallic and shiny.
Yep.
And this was such an interesting like moment that was if you didn't know any other context of this, and if it wasn't for the music being brooding, could be romantic. So like Sabretooth, he's like, so Wolverine cleaning his motorcycle. Sabretooth is like driving by, presumably nearby.
Well, at first I thought it was an audio cue, because I thought it was he heard the motorcycle and then started smelling. But then you do like this massive pullout, and you realize they are miles away from each other.
And he's not even heading towards the mansion. Sabretooth's not heading towards
No, he's just getting to New York, basically, like to Westchester.
And so Wolverine smells him and says, Sabretooth. And then it cuts over to Sabretooth, and he smells, and he's like, Wolverine. And that's why I was like, well, that's kind of romantic. But also, like, life must suck for those guys if they can smell things miles and miles away.
Right.
I know that they know each other's scents very well, which is, once again, super romantic. But, like, that's... I feel like that's a stretch even for the X-Men. I'm not, like, once again, I don't know all the iterations of everybody, but, like, to just be so unintentional, because it wasn't like Wolverine, or maybe Sabretooth was keeping a radar out for Wolverine, but Wolverine was definitely not looking for Sabretooth at the moment, and still, like, sensed him.
Well, and he also did not smell Sabretooth by the corner shop in the last episode, but this definitely seems farther away.
Interesting.
What animal can smell the furthest? Apparently, turkey vultures can smell prey from 2 miles away. Bears have the strongest sense of smell for predators. Some say bears can smell up to 20 miles away.
Oh, damn. I guess that kind of fits like the vibe of the Wolverine.
I will now accept that answer.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so...
But also, having a sense of smell that strong must be the worst existence on the planet. Yeah. We have a horrible, disgusting society.
Yeah. Also, like, if anybody's ever been to Times Square or Hollywood Boulevard, you don't want that power.
Yeah. Oh, wow, it's so much piss.
Right. Anyway, so after this, like, really kind of cute scene, if you took the music away.
Can you do that, Ron? Can you remake the scene with, like, a love song playing under it?
Let me put a note somewhere for myself to do that.
You're literally going to edit this, so you're going to hear it.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Rod, when you're doing this, add a reminder to yourself in your app to make that happen.
But leave this in. Yeah.
So then Wolverine decides, he does the not Sailor Moon kind of thing, but this very, like, superhero, like, getting dressed sequence.
Suit up, yeah. It was very much like a Keaton Batman vibe for me.
Yes, yeah. And also, if you take it in the context that I presented with the romantic thing, he's like getting all dressed up for Sabretooth. And then
he's getting ready for the big date.
Right, yeah. And then he drives away on his motorcycle, and he passes Scott and Kurt. They're like, oh, he was off somewhere in a hurry. And these kids, I would say they're nosy, except they're teenagers, and Wolverine seems like a really cool dude in this series more than an asshole. So Kurt's like, you want to follow him? I'm like, yeah. Like, okay, let's do it. And then maybe this is more into like what you pointed out in the last episode of Scott just being curious. Like when he went to go look for Toad under the bleachers, he wasn't trying to be vindictive. He was like, what's going on down there?
Yeah.
Like, where's Wolverine going? So they go follow him, and
they go to the garage.
Yeah. And Nightcrawler points at what looks like a souped up Hummer.
Yeah.
And says, can we take the X van? That didn't look like a van to me, but I don't know. Maybe lost interpretation in translation.
Right, because when you hear van, you think of like the Punisher's van, which is just like the box car that has the pull aside, like what Predators would use kind of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Scott was like, and this is the teenager part. He was like, let's take something a little more incognito, which I agree that was it was more incognito than the souped up Hummer, but it was like a sports car. I don't know cars well enough to know. I know it was modeled after a specific one.
It felt like a classic Corvette to me, but I could be very wrong. Or it was like a Mustang Barracuda or some shit like that. But regardless, it is not a car that doesn't stand out. They were not getting in a Honda Civic. They were teenagers getting in a sports car.
Right.
Which we see in LA all the time, and they fucking stand out in a heartbeat.
Yeah. They're made to stand out because like they're usually content creators, so they want to be like in viral videos and Snapchat and stuff.
Kids with rich parents. Let's not forget them. Yep.
That are also trying to be influencers.
Yeah.
but like then this is the teenager part for me was not only that part, but like I would think the wild card that Wolverine is, you'd want to take something that could like sustain battle, even if it's on incognito. And they took like the nicest car that you can't even like lean on, wrong.
Right.
And my note initially was they steal Professor Xavier's car, but we found out later that's Scott's car, which doesn't make sense if you're an adult because you're like, we're not going to take this car out of the garage. But if you're a teenager trying to impress Jean Grey, you will take that out as many opportunities as you can.
Also, how does Scott afford, quote unquote, that car? Because we know nothing about his family or parents, regardless of what we know from the other series or the comic books. In this iteration, we know nothing about his family. We don't even know if he has a family. So does that mean it got like gifted to him for his 16th birthday by Xavier?
That's why I kind of got it. Was like these kids at a certain level just get like, that's part of like your room and board. You get a sports car.
I mean, I guess if you're going to risk your life on these fucking suicide missions for this crazy old guy, then sure.
Right. Yeah. And he got the perfect one because Xavier's just like reading his mind in his sleep to figure out his dream car.
Perfect. Yeah. It's also red, so because they're like, oh, I don't.
You can't see anything.
Yeah, color change doesn't matter. Scott doesn't even know part of it's white.
That's hilarious. So dark and hilarious.
And then we get the animated transition, which actually looked good. It was finally that era of doing the transition that it didn't look like it was like a cheap button on like, what was it, an Avid editor or something like that. It actually was a solid animated transition.
Was that the X?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. It's like and to any youngins out there listening, this was the era, or this was after the era, but it was still happening. I think early 90s, definitely the 80s, was that whole star wipe transition was like super cliche. And so this was kind of like...
To the point where they literally made fun of it in The Simpsons.
You're right, yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you watch any of the original Star Wars movies, or they pay homage to it in like the newer ones, but where it's literally just like a line that goes across the screen. But yeah, like this X one actually kind of like looked kind of cool. Transition to Kitty at school, and she's basically dealing with like her Regina George.
Yeah.
Like there's just like mean girls there. They're just being mean because they're mean.
So, trying to avoid spoilers on stuff, I did actually look up the characters. They appear in future episodes of the show, but they are not known characters by any means. They are essentially just like trying to think of like who an equivalent would be. Like they're like the bully in Saved by the Bell, who was just kind of there but had no purpose other than being just like the bully in a few episodes.
So far, we'll see how crowded it gets at the school, but I kind of appreciate so far in the first 2 episodes that we've watched that they didn't make the school just like all mutants.
Right.
So it does feel like that Scott and Jean and Toad are kind of like black sheep.
Right.
They're trying to hide in there because otherwise it falls into like, what's the joke with like High School Musical or Grease or something where it's like, oh, every single person at this school is a trained singer and dancer,
Oh yeah, that came from Not Another Teen Movie.
Another teen movie. Or like they don't mention it in Cobra Kai, but if you ever watch it by the last episode of each season, the karate version of that, where every single student in the high school is like a karate master, and there's only usually 2 Asian kids, which, I know that like not just Asian kids could be good in martial arts and stuff, but this show takes place in Los Angeles.
It takes place in Reseda.
Oh, okay, yeah. Like
not just LA, fucking Reseda.
And at a majority white school, and everyone is like the Broadway musical singing and dancing martial arts equivalent. So everyone's like master fighter, even characters that you've just seen tangentially throughout the show.
Right.
Like that kid in the background is like all of a sudden is like clotheslining people and throwing people off banisters and stuff.
Right. And this is not like, doing Friday Night Lights where it takes place in Texas, where it is known to be a football town. Reseda is not known to be a center of martial arts in California.
In fact, it's a big deal in the show that 2 dojos opened up at the same time to rival each other, let alone just exist. But anyway, so I kind of appreciate that in this, even though it could have been really easy at this time to do that. They're like, no, we're just making this a regular high school, and there just happens to be like a weird principal and a couple kids that are trying their best to blend in and not make waves. So Kitty is just dealing with, we kind of pick up through context clues that she's pretty like intelligent, but not good at like gym class or physical education and stuff. And so these girls are just making fun of her for not being good at track and field. They shove her into a locker.
Were the lockers at your school big enough that a human could have not comfortably, but feasibly fit inside of them?
Mine was, yeah.
Ours were not. Okay.
I know. Did you have like the half ones that were like
half as thick? I don't think you could fit somebody's skull through it without like giving them a concussion. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So ours was like, I mean, if you have to be kind of small, but a person could be shoved in there. I know that there were other schools in our district that had the half tall ones. You know, there's one at the bottom and one at the top and stuff. Those are obviously not. But I don't know if
we had we had full height but skinny.
Ooh, yeah. No, I'm not familiar with that. That seems like less useful though, because if you're trying to get books in and out and stuff, what good does like a really tall, skinny?
They were garbage. I mean, I went to a private school. Okay, it was garbage. We were lucky we had fucking lockers.
I think part of it was I went to such a small school. Like my graduating class was considered one of the larger ones and was like less than 100 kids.
Yeah,
and so there was enough room for enough lockers. And so I one of the things I did like about high school, even though I didn't like a lot of it, was that our lockers were big enough that I actually could decorate it, you know?
Right.
So I had the thing where I had like the locker shelf and like the cutouts of stuff, and the top part was like snacks and things, and it kind of made sense. Because I know that some of my friends who went to other schools are like, oh, we can literally I can fit my book bag in there. Maybe
you know the best way to explain it? If the book was on its side, when a book is lengthwise as opposed to widthwise, that was how it fit. If I tried to turn the book sideways, it would not have fit the other way.
That sucks. That's a crime.
Yep. But yeah, so she gets tossed in there, and then we see this dude walking down the hallway, just spray painting lockers, and
he's an anarchist.
Yeah, maybe because I didn't go to a public school, I was like, were kids actually doing that in that time frame, or was that just a perpetual trope because one kid did it once and it made the news, and then it was like, that's what our definition of a bully is for the rest of known human existence.
When it happened at our school, it was rare enough that it was a big deal.
Right.
But stuff like that did happen. I think somebody painted some of the lockers maybe once. Mm-hmm. There was a couple times where people set off fire extinguishers in the hallways, which was a huge deal because that's like I think that's a crime, if I'm not mistaken, because it's like toxic.
I had a kid light a fire on the stage of our high school, so right. my fire people issue was way bigger than yours.
Well, no, there's the fire extinguisher because I think it's just like toxic to be in the air. Like
you're not supposed to breathe that shit.
But I remember that
because your school used asbestos in their fire extinguishers, probably.
Probably, I don't know. Yeah, and I remember like there was all these like pranks, like we had these stairs that were just like stone slabs over a metal frame, and at one of the senior pranks one year, not my class but the class ahead of me, they had unscrewed the slabs so you couldn't get up and down the stairs and stuff.
Good.
So it wasn't common, but it happened enough times for me to remember, but also not enough times. It was still like a super big deal when it did happen.
I do love that this show has become high school trauma for John and Rod.
Oh, yeah, right. I don't know if you ever had a kid that was so brazen that he would do it in the middle of broad daylight and also be wearing like a, John Travolta leather jacket, bad boy,
right,
hair slicked back kind of thing. Because the middle of the day between classes is a little bold because there's going to be like teachers and shit in the hallways and people hearing stuff. Like, it wasn't like existence stopped in the hallways between class.
Yeah.
He's like spray painting just like a line down the lockers, and Kitty hears it and she's like, please help. He's unfazed by it.
Why would he care?
Yeah.
You literally just described him as an anarchist, so.
Yeah. I mean, he does help her, but he's just like, he doesn't even think that's odd. He's like, oh, hey, what are you doing there?
So I would not say that that's him helping.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. But he is curious, so he's like knocking on the locker and stuff. I don't think he can quite tell where the noise is coming from. And because Kitty is, so stressed out, it's that, I'm going to assume is similar. It's the same in this show as other X-Men stuff. It's like when you're in that puberty era of your life and you're like in high stress times, that's when your powers kind of like start activating more.
Yeah, like it's a hormonal change is what usually makes it happen before they're able to control it. Yeah.
So she phases through the locker door and kind of like tackles him.
And his reaction is cool.
Cool, yeah. And he has the spray paint on his face.
He was getting high off of that. Let's be real. He was definitely inhaling the fumes of the spray can that was across his nose.
Yo, is that just the thing of the 90s and 2000s too, or is that
huffing
with kids huffing?
Huffing was totally in the 90s and 2000s.
But is it still happening now, or
probably
is just something left?
Or people just upgraded to better drugs.
Right. Yeah. So she's still like traumatized by it, but he's like, "That's so cool. Let's hang out," And she's like, "No, this is not cool." And he's like, "No, I'm one person that could understand this."
He actually says, "I get the beauty of it."
Yeah, which is kind of nice, but also kind of creepy coming from a stranger. And
yeah.
Is this where, I don't think I wrote this down, where he said, like, I could rock your world?
And he's basically like, watch this, and he makes the ground shake. So
yeah, which super unsettling, because like that has to get it. Okay, so like this school's abandoned at this point, right? Because like no one's, they're running out of the classrooms and stuff.
And again, this isn't fucking LA where people are like, oh no, it's a fucking 2.5 magnitude. Nobody gives a shit. This isn't like you said, Chicago area. And it's like, that's not where we normally feel that stuff.
Yeah. And she has the correct reaction. She's like, what the fuck?
But like, then she jumps and calls him a freak, which I feel like that's you're not allowed to say that about somebody who also does the same shit you do. So
yeah, she's dealing with everything, but she's super stressed out by this. And I figured out through context clues that this is Lance, because another mutant at the school and stuff. Yep. He makes an earthquake. I wasn't certain that he was Avalanche at this point, because I didn't want to assume that just the other earthquake mutant was Avalanche.
So let's talk about that. So Lance in the show is a combination of two characters.
Okay.
The traditional Avalanche that you're thinking of, who was in X-Men 92, and Richter, who is a member of X-Force, and later would be X-Factor in the comics. Because Avalanche's name in the comics was Dominikos Petrakis. And apologies to any of our Greek listeners if I'm butchering the name. But yeah, they essentially Americanized his character and kind of combined the physical aspects of Richter into this singular character.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense, because it probably is like kind of redundant to have like two basically like earthquake people in the same show.
Or, not that they were ever even going to use Richter, but I think they wanted to not have people with such 1960s comic book names. Like even Toad, we talked about Toad used to be Mortimer, and like they changed names to make them more believable in the modern era.
Yeah. So
because even though Jessica Jones, although I will say Jessica Jones is the most comic book name I've ever heard, but I've also met 3 different real life Jessica Joneses in my life.
Really?
So
that's awesome.
Yep.
Their parents were fan.
Not everybody has the double initial scenario, but apparently a few people had the Jessica Joneses.
So Kitty is freaked out. She runs away. We catch up with Kitty, who is late to PE because she was stuck in a locker, which I guess, to be fair, is the reason there weren't a whole lot of people in the hallways, but I guess we're assuming that everyone was a PE outside.
I mean, usually the way that it would work is if, she got shoved in the locker on the way to class and then the period started, Yeah. Did you notice that she doesn't stooge on him, though? Like, there's still, like, that high school, like, rule of, like, even if somebody's a piece of shit to you, you still don't call them out on it in front of the teacher.
Yeah, because
it was like, we'll sort it out on our own kind of scenario.
Because she's probably also afraid of, like, what there's probably worse repercussions for tattling on somebody.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it's right that she didn't say anything, but it was also the, like, we'll sort it out ourselves rather than me bringing teachers into it, because you're probably going to escalate if I do.
And also the teachers in this show are very much how teachers in like other teen things around this time, or maybe even now, where they're not helpful. Like the teacher probably wouldn't have believed her anyway.
Right.
And then even in this scenario, she's like, why are you late? You got to go first now.
Yep.
It's like, is that how you handle things? Like,
yes.
I don't understand. Like,
yes, it is.
So she tries to run the long jump, and she's not good at it.
She is not good at it. She
doesn't even jump, really. She just kind of stumbles into the sand pit.
I luckily never had to do track and field for PE, because I feel like I would have been in a Kitty scenario there of just, I'm just going to like embarrass myself or hurt myself.
PE is why I have consistent nosebleeds, because like as a kid, I had
cocaine
vessel busted in my nose because of track and field. And probably cocaine.
Yeah.
Because it was the 90s.
It was the 90s.
So meanwhile, across the track, there's these 2 kids that we see are helping Lance trying to break in through like the sky. Actually, I didn't think about this. You're trying to break in through like kind of a skylight to the thing. So maybe they're carrying on the tradition of the mutants.
No, they're going the opposite way. They're trying to go down through the skylights instead of up through the skylights.
And Lance is like watching Kitty. So now Kitty has Lance, Jean, and Xavier watching her throughout her day within a 24-hour time period. Lance kind of like gives us the exposition dump. The 2 people that are with him are like, can't you just use your powers to help us break into the office? He's like, people can't know that we broke in because we're trying to cheat on the test, and if they know we broke in, they'll change the answers. And
not just cheat on the test, they want to steal all the questions and then sell it.
Yeah,
they're literally thinking like the plan from The Perfect Score at this point.
Oh yeah. And he was like, leave leave that up to me. You go find the customers. And he's like, but I do know somebody that could help us. And then you follow his like eye line out to Kitty, and because he saw her face through the locker. And then back at the PE class, the mean girls are getting ready. One of the mean girls is getting ready to do the long jump that Kitty just like failed at. You get the impression that she would have succeeded,
or at least done something satisfactory.
Yeah. And then in the middle of her jump, Avalanche, or I guess he's just Lance at this point. I didn't know what to expect. I thought he was gonna make an earthquake or whatever, but he like controls the sand and stuff.
It was like a weird pop-up geyser thing.
Yeah. So then like my note here was Lance attempts homicide. It looked like he was trying to kill her.
I hate it when you say stuff like that because you're right.
Yeah. And so Kitty's freaked out because this is like the 17th weird thing that's happened that day. Nobody else is fazed by it. She runs away, and then she physically bumps into Jean.
Right.
Jean doesn't do too much to she doesn't make a scene.
Right. She just kind of lets her go.
And then, as we alluded to earlier, Kitty escapes to the theater department.
Yep. Fucking theater kids.
While I was watching this, I was like, why do the kids always go to the theater department to have their solace moment? I was like, it's probably the theater kids that are writing these shows. You know, most of these screenwriters are in Hollywood, and there probably aren't a whole lot of like kids who are really into physics that are writing screenplays these days, right? And so like
maybe one.
Yeah. But it makes sense why there's like a lot of teen dramas and stuff when they have their like self-affirming moment. They're out on stage at the theater or something in school. So Kitty's there, and because she's like in this extended state of distress, so she's like phasing through like the props on the stage and stuff.
Well, she kicks the table, and then like a bowl with fruit pops up, and she tries to catch it, and it just like phases right through her hands.
There's a mask behind her on the wall that kind of is a little reminiscent of like the Jim Carrey mask.
Well, before that, she actually, like, for a quick second, pauses. She concentrates. And it's the first time she feels like she has any sort of control. And she puts her hand through the bowl on purpose for the first time.
Still kind of waiting for one of these Xmen things to show, like, Kitty not doing it well the first time and injuring herself. Because, not that I want to see it necessarily, but it feels like it's an inevitability because we just saw, like, the bed sheets and stuff that didn't make it all the way through.
Right.
Like, what happens when the panic attack doesn't last the amount of time she needs to face or something, and like I don't know, she cuts something or like loses a finger or whatever because
I mean
not perfect control over it.
In the comics, especially with the modern Krakoan era, like Kitty goes into full badass mode and will like phase her hand in through somebody's chest, and is like, if I phase back in, everything I'm touching just splats out effectively. Yeah, so
that's awesome. That's
I'm gonna fry your brain and you can't do shit about it.
Yeah, that's like a Mortal Kombat move. I would love to see that.
Too bad it's the DC license and not the Marvel license there.
Right. There's so many rumors of Ed Boon trying to make something work out with Marvel, but I cannot see Disney allowing any of those characters having fatalities done on them, even if that did work out.
Nope.
Even DC didn't really allow it. They were like, we can have them in the fighting game, but we can't have these fatalities happen.
Yeah, what was it? A brutality or something like that?
Yeah, I mean,
that bullshit.
It was just like they get knocked over or something. I was like, This is not Mortal Kombat anymore. Jean catches up with her in there as Kitty's like holding this mask. And
yep.
I feel like the whole point of Kitty grabbing the mask was so that Jean could literally tell her to like put her mask down.
Right.
Or take off her mask. I was like, okay, we're just going on the nose here.
Well, and Jean gives the speech that we've heard, throughout other X-Men stories all the time of like, you have this wonderful new gift. And then, Kitty's response is, not a gift, this is just a curse. And that's the most like high school angsty phrase, because we've all been there, and it's like high school is hard enough just being normal. It's like I can't imagine what that shit was like, to the nth degree for Kitty. So
and I forgot to mention this earlier, but in the opening scene, the opening scene after the credits, the opening title or whatever, when Nightcrawler's like late to class, whatever song that is that's playing in the background is like a good representation of like that kind of like emo-ish punk at the time. You're like, I don't even know what the singer was singing lyrically, but my head is filling in like, I don't even like school, my parents don't understand, like that. It's just like the vibe you get.
It was like that whiny Simple Plan type shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of like an extension of that moment. And is this where she says like it's tough enough being a kid?
That's where she says it's hard enough being normal.
And so it's like fair. I didn't have mutant powers in high school and I fucking hated it.
Right.
So
like I said, this show is high school trauma for JC and Rod.
Right. They have that conversation and Jean's like, now watch. And she like levitates the mask out of her hands and hangs it back up on the wall, and that doesn't help.
Right.
Kitty's more freaked out than ever.
Well, and then we talk about Professor X not understanding social cues. Then Jean doesn't understand social cues because she fucking says, oh, well, you don't trust me. I know because I can read your thoughts.
Yeah, holy shit. And that's the tipping point for Kitty. She's like, oh my God, no. And she's like, nopes out of there. She runs out, and Lance catches up with her. And even if he's supposed to be a villain, I feel like he understands humans, because his whole thing is he's just like, he appeals to her and is like nice to her.
But that could also be him being a manipulator too.
Well, that's what I mean, though. Like, at least he knows that, even if he's using it for the wrong reason, which is just funny that the bad guy has that skill and the good guy so far haven't exhibited that yet, except maybe Wolverine. But we don't even really see enough of him to know. He's just not been an asshole yet.
Yeah, and he basically says to Jean that he's the only one that Kitty needs. And that's where it falls into that total, like, gaslighting manipulator personality.
Yeah, so Lance, he's doing a good job of actually, like, relating to Kitty, which I feel like at this age especially, any time in life, but especially at this age, you're just looking for someone that can connect with you about how, like, weird this time in your life is. I hated it when people told me that when I was that age, but now that I'm, like, far out of that age, I understand that. It's like, it's really true. It's like you're trying to find this balance of fitting in, but also being your own person is like a weird in-between.
Yeah.
And Lance kind of gets it.
Yeah, I mean, he basically says that he understands how she feels. She gets defensive, being like, oh, what? Did you read my fucking mind too? And he's like, no, I went through it myself.
Yeah. Which is actually, for her, fair question at this point. She's like, she's watched Sand try to kill Regina George and like Earthquake Man. And she doesn't even know about the strangers that appeared at her house to try to get her parents.
No, she's completely unaware of this, because this was well into the pre-cell phone era of, like, if you had a cell phone in high school, it was instantly confiscated at this point.
Yeah.
Because they thought all of us who had phones were drug dealers. That's why.
Right, yeah.
No. But yeah, and at that point, there is contact between Professor and Jean, and is basically like, yeah, you need to, I'm a little worried about Lance, and you got to stick to it or we may lose her. And then we see he's at the top of a set of stairs.
Yeah, because he's like, we have to overcome our obstacles, and like some are more annoying than others. Or
yes.
What was the phrasing there?
Yeah, that was pretty much it. Like,
I felt like there was an intention that wasn't fully communicated there for that scene to happen.
I just didn't know where he was.
Yeah, because my note here was like, Xavier airs his grievances about ADA non-compliance.
Yeah,
but it doesn't really come back up again. It is a good point to make.
But I just didn't have an understanding of where he was during that day, because he's like, okay, cool, I'll worry about Lance, you worry about Kitty, and then Lance is at the school with Kitty, and then he's at a building with a high, like a nasty high staircase that he can't go down.
He just like lied to Jean to get her there.
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
That was a weird one. Like, obviously, Saturday morning cartoon role, you give concessions and stuff like that, but that was like, wait, what?
Kurt and Scott find Wolverine just in time for Wolverine to start his fight with Sabretooth.
Well, they lose him at first, and then they are able to see him.
And that's where we find out that's actually Scott's car, because like Nightcrawler like, leans on it or something, and Scott's like, hey, that is smudge proof, not
dent proof.
Yeah. And
yep.
I'm like, you fucking took your sports car out here? Okay.
Stupid teenagers, man.
I was like, teenagers, man. And okay, well, maybe if you don't want this car to get damaged, you drive it away from the two like ancient feral figures. This is one of those. I've been meaning to say this is the last episode of this one. This show is, even though we talk a lot about it, like these are longer than our normal episodes, there's not a whole lot story-wise happening,
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of fighting, which I think was the MO at the time. It's like really spectacular fights and stuff.
To be fair, we're filling it with our own generational trauma.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a lot of tangents. But this was one of those scenes where it was like a really spectacular fight, but I can't really comment on a whole lot that like furthered the story more than like, Sabretooth and Wolverine are also enemies in this.
But there were two things that did stand out in it. First was, we've heard in 92, Sabretooth called Wolverine Runt. That is consistent between the two shows. Wolverine called Sabretooth Pops in this one, specifically.
Oh, I didn't even pick up on that.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess that gives the impression that, like, that one of them is older than the other one to an extent. And then they go into their fight. The bike lands right through Scott's car. And then they start, like, throwing cars through the parking garage and shit like that. It's a stronger version of Sabretooth. Like, 92 Sabretooth was throwing cars in the air. He's throwing cars so hard they are going through planes of cement.
And I also think those are stronger cars too, because I don't think physics works like that.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think cars can pierce cement, but
especially cars that it's not like they were like on fire or anything.
Right.
They were just like they weren't even started.
They were blunt weapons. But then the other part that does further the story of these two is they mention that they're destined, that one essentially needs to take out the other. And Wolverine calls out Sabretooth. He's like, oh, I didn't think you believed that kind of crap.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that either.
Yeah, but it was
story.
It was a little bit different than the other versions of Sabretooth that we've heard in the past, where it's more like Wolverine wants revenge because Sabretooth has done him wrong or killed people and stuff like that. But this is the like, I'm hunting you because there's some prophecy or some shit.
Interesting. So
yeah.
There's actually a little mystery there for us.
Yep.
Like genuine, because we don't know how this works out.
Yep.
Or if it ever does work out. Do we know if this series ends?
You mean like with a formal series finale?
Yeah.
Didn't look that up.
Well, we'll find out together then, all of us.
So then the two next notes I have are Cyclops shoots because Sabretooth has pinned Wolverine behind a car, and then Nightcrawler sucks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because like Wolverine, if he was like a normal person, would have just been cut in half by this point because he's pinned against like a cement wall.
Right.
What did Nightcrawler not do?
He just teleported and tried to punch Sabretooth, but he's still a weak teenager, so his punches do nothing.
He just got swatted away.
Yeah.
And then Cyclops just blasted him and actually saved Wolverine.
But, Wolverine makes the save on Nightcrawler. They end up falling into a elevator, and Sabretooth gives the like, oh, well, this is just the start of this shit. Bye. And they don't follow him, which is consistent across all X-Men cartoons, apparently.
Yeah, right. And actually, this is kind of, a little tangent to the ending of the last episode with Magneto. Like, we're just getting started. So I guess I'm kind of getting the vibe that we're just introducing.
There's a build going on. Yeah.
And we don't know if they're connected or not. Or
it
feels like to me so far that these are all like separate incidents.
Right. So far, at least. Yep. And then we get the first time of seeing animosity between Wolverine and Scott, where he's basically like, "Don't fight my battles. I won't fight yours. You don't fight mine."
So that we're seeing a little bit of asshole Wolverine come out, but also
fucking stupid teenager put him like he didn't help.
Yeah, and have kids follow you to a fight. He's like, I don't want to explain to Xavier why you died.
Yeah, I don't want to explain why the blue kid got crushed.
Yeah, he's been here for 2 days.
Yeah, he's been here for 2 days and he can't throw a punch apparently. That's why Nightcrawler got a sword in the comics, because he couldn't fucking punch.
And Kitty does meet up with Lance after school, like he suggested. Opens up to him. They had kind of, if you didn't know that he had ulterior motives, Lance actually feels like a good guy at this point because they're connecting. But then
telling her to embrace it in the first way is to like go through that wall, and she's not questioning any of it.
As well as to say, like he spins it in like kind of a manipulative way where he's like, then you can start by breaking into this office. Mm-hmm. But he phrases it in a way that just sounds like not as nefarious.
No, it's like stepping through a door kind of scenario, not we're going to commit some crime.
Right. It's kind of like, I think in college, there was a lab that had a projector that me and like 10 of us would sneak into every night and use the projector to watch movies. Mm. And it's not really, I mean, we could get in trouble for it, but we weren't doing it. We weren't like stealing chemicals or like, doing.
Yeah, you weren't making bombs or anything.
Yeah, we were just like going in there to watch movies. And so if we got in trouble, that'd be one thing. So this felt like one of those things, like you want to help us like sneak through the window,
right?
And things. And she just, when she phases through into the room, she's like kind of giggling, like, "Oh, this is the first time I've ever done anything bad."
Right. Yeah, she opens the door and lets him in, and he immediately like runs to the computer.
Yeah, and she's like, "Wait, what are you doing?" And I guess it's still early enough in the 2000s that they're storing information on 3.5-inch floppy disks.
I actually thought it was a zip disk because of the shape of it.
Oh,
like it was it looked different enough. Like it was like a little bit thicker. So what our generation had for like 3 years with zip disks, that's what it looked like to me. But you notice when it popped out, the slide was on the wrong side of it. It was on the part you would grab as opposed to the other side.
Backwards.
Yeah. Then levels better than the CD-ROM from the Spider-Man cartoon.
Spider-Man, yeah, that's in like the plastic case or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And then she kind of has like moral qualms about it. She's like, wait, this whole thing is about cheating?
Her parents have also arrived simultaneously right as Xavier's there, and they're like, she hasn't done this before. And it's like, yeah, she also hasn't phased through floors before either. She's having a rough 48 hours.
It was interesting because this is something that you only know if you're the audience watching the show. Lance is like, it doesn't matter if we cheat. This is just a system to keep us down. You know, we're just trying to level the playing field.
Yeah, evening the score.
If this was not a mutant high school, that is not a morally correct perspective. But since Mystique is their principal...
Nope, she's not their principal. This is a different school.
Oh, that's right. Okay, never mind then. Take all that away. I forgot they were a different high school.
Yeah,
okay, no,
remember this is not Bayville.
This is Chicago, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so he's still wrong. wait. This whole, like, kerfuffle's happening. Lance starts, like, another earthquake. And my note here is Jean is taking way too long to intervene.
Kitty, at that point, wants out. And there's the whole parents walking into the room, and everybody is kind of just, like, in this, like, awkward position. And Lance does the bad stereotype, like, grab by the wrist scenario.
Yeah.
The bookcase just drops on Kitty's dad.
He's got a broken leg at this point.
Yeah, something's not going. But yeah, so at that point, then Lance starts to like, oh, I need to get the fuck out of here, so I'm going to blast a hole in the wall, and does it with kind of like reckless abandon. The room starts to rumble. Kitty's dad gives the heartfelt like, sorry, I'm not perfect, I'm learning. You know, Jean is there.
Which is a really progressive speech for like essentially the late 90s.
Yeah.
Come from parents like, hey, I'm learning, you know, you're different, and I didn't know how this works.
Right. At that point, Lance just kind of like makes everything way worse and way bigger. And, you know, as stuff starts crumbling around them, Jean is trying to like hold the room up around them and basically said, like, you know, you talked about this being a gift or a curse. If you go with Lance, it is going to become a curse. The parents start begging, and then that's when Kitty actually, with her powers, phases out of Lance's grasp.
But even though he knew the power, that had to have freaked him out, right? If you're holding someone's hand or grabbing someone's wrist or hand, and they just like...
I don't know. I feel like from an outsider's perspective, sure, but like the dude could literally make earthquakes with his hands, so...
Which I haven't mentioned so far, but I both loved and hated the way they showed him using his powers, where his like eyes rolled back in the back of his head. Because I liked it that it showed that there's effort, because there's a lot of times when there's, even in the X-Men shows, the only way we see that there's effort is like when Storm passes out afterwards or something.
Yeah.
But during the moment, we have to like rely on their vocal delivery of like yelling and stuff.
Right.
This is when it kind of showed like the physicality of like making that happen. But I hated it because it looked like he was like constipated or something, you know? And
Again,
I'm not saying that like,
always forever waiting to see how you're going to finish sentences.
right? And it's not like a knock on the animators or something. I think it's just like me thinking like high school kids,
yeah,
or whatever. You know, it was at the end of it, I net liked it more than anything. I was just like, ooh, is this how it looks like when he poops?
We're never going to do a video show, Rod. I swear to God.
Okay.
At that point, when the phase out happens, Lance just keeps making the rumbling get worse, and the ceiling just straight up collapses onto Kitty. So from Lance's perspective, he murdered her.
And her parents watched their daughter die because Jean is keeping the parents safe. And so they're just horrified watching this pile of rubble over their daughter, their 15-year-old daughter.
And all of the building is piling up on top of them, too. And she's like, this sucks.
Yeah, so it's a lot happening. Like, not only has Kitty had a rough 48 hours,
yeah,
parents are...
actually, this is only 24 hours, not even 48 hours. Yeah.
It's like the night before.
But yeah, Xavier kind of like phones in to Jean and is like, let me help you. And then we get the reveal that, you know, I don't think anybody was expecting them to kill Kitty because she's in the opening credits. She phases through. They have a hug. And Jean is like, can we get the fuck out of here, maybe?
I'm not Alpha Jean yet.
Yeah. Omega.
Omega, okay.
Yeah. Omega level is the strongest.
It's like, I'm not Phoenix Jean yet.
Yeah. But yeah, we kind of get the, you know, the understanding from Kitty that she feels comfortable enough to phase 3 other people through the rocks with her, which is that's a big learning curve for the last like day.
I just had to accept that because she hadn't exhibited any evidence before that would work.
Right.
But, you know, sure, let's go for it. It's a cartoon. And they make it out and they have their like Full House moment where they decide, you know, it is better if Kitty goes with Xavier and stuff because Xavier has earned the parents' trust at this point. There was some nice kind of throwaway lines in there that made the thing less rushed. Where, like, I think the dad even said, like, we have a few things to talk about.
Yeah, that was the line that stood out to me, is we have some things we should discuss or something along those lines. And it's like, yeah, you're not going to just get in a plane with these people tomorrow morning or tonight. But it's like, no, like, let's actually talk this out like adults.
Because I feel like in other shows, including the animated series, it's just been like, all right,
you got to say 92 because they're 92. All the animated series.
92 animated series. She would just walk on the animated 92 animated series. She just would have said no. But like in other similar shows, they've just been like, okay, let's go, and then just walk on the ship right there. But yeah, his dad was like, yeah, we'll work some stuff out. Then like it kind of like pans over up like the hill, like across the way. Lance is getting away, and Principal Dark. No. Yeah, we see Princess. Okay, so this is why I got confused. So Principal Darkholm shows up at this school.
She shows up at the school, not because she's the principal there. Yes.
And she recruits Lance, which, my note here is Mystique recruits Avalanche, which is interesting. And I don't know enough about comics to know if this is just like a trope or a thing that happens all the time. But it's in another show where Mystique has Avalanche as one of her henchmen.
There are different iterations of like the Brotherhood and the Mutant Liberation Front and all that kind of stuff. I don't remember that off the top of my head, actually. Marvel Avalanche. Avalanche's story before Mystique recruits him for the second iteration of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So yes, that was...
He's part of the Brotherhood.
That is something that is common enough.
And that's where we leave that episode, as Lance is going with Mystique.
And she specifically calls him her Avalanche.
So that was a confirmation for me. It's like, okay, so I wasn't wrong in assuming that the Earthquake guy was Avalanche.
Yes, you were accurate in that.
But now I'm looking forward to seeing the next episode, and this is not a spoiler because we don't know, we haven't watched it yet. A surprise of Lance like transferring to the high school in New York.
I mean, I feel like inevitably that's what it has to be because of Raven's appearance. Yeah.
Yeah, so Kitty is going to show up to her first day in the new high school and be like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And that has to be interesting. I feel like this show so far has shown that they're writing a little smarter than just like a normal cartoon where like everyone just accepts anything that happens.
Right.
There has to be like some level of conflict outside of even the mutant stuff. Like, what you bullied me back in Chicago and you followed me to New York? Like, this is weird.
Right. It definitely has like some of those like teen movie vibe. There's going to be awkward moments, but I also feel like people are going to like keep their mouths shut and not say certain things and stuff like that. Yeah. That is the end of the episode. And we just, unfortunately, because there is not the same, 2 books written about the production of this show, there are way fewer references for me to pull from like various wikis and fandoms and stuff like that. So
yeah, I would actually want to invite, if you were a fan of the show or are a fan of the show and know like like little like kind of granular details of stuff, or maybe even some like urban legends or
the references that are more direct. Yeah,
leave comments either on the episode if you can do that when you're listening, or on one of the posts about this episode and stuff, because we can just like that could be our source.
Yeah, we will absolutely shout you out. I want to say the first series we did that with a handful of people, that if we fucked something up, we would correct it. Yeah, like on the Spider-Man episode, we said that Gladiator had like punched Rogue over an ocean, and that was just a slip up. It was Juggernaut who got punched over the ocean. Right. But always comment and let us know when we fuck something up, because that's a thing we do.
Like you said, especially because we don't have the books about this, so people who actually like watch the show when it happened, or like just know more of the lore and stuff, this is where you can share it. So
yeah.
Cool. Any closing thoughts on it?
No, I mean, I think we already alluded to it, but I kind of like that it's a slow burn of introductions of characters. One hero and one villain introduced in the last episode between Nightcrawler and Toad. We got one more with Kitty and Avalanche in this episode. So the pacing is very different than X-Men 92. And not that one is better or worse than the other. It's the focus isn't the X-Men as a team. It's a little more of like getting to know the individual first.
I know I've poked fun at a couple things in this episode and the last one, but there's not really a lot of stuff to make fun of as far as like cartoon, animation.
There was one coloring glitch where the side of Scott's head, it instead of the brown like sideburn area, it was just like it almost looked like he had the mop style haircut because the sideburn was skin colored, but like,
yeah,
I'm like super anal about spotting those. So yeah.
Yeah. But I was even just thinking, just story wise and stuff. Like, even there's a couple of things I made fun of. Like, I feel like there's a lot less of like, sure, why not? Moments. It was like stuff kind of like tracked. Like, these feel like teenagers, arguing and stuff. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this so far has probably been my favorite cold opening of like just all the X-Men stuff, because it was terrifying and super intriguing.
Right.
So far strong. Opening 2 episodes and stuff. So actually genuinely looking forward to what's happening in this show.
Well, good, because I think we have like 45 total or 50 episodes to get through on this one. So the next year of our lives, Rod, with obviously X-Men 97 interrupting, but yeah.
Yeah. Let's hope the show actually ends. We don't know that yet, but we're going to find out together.
Feel like it would, but I'm not 100% sure.
Thanks for joining us. If you have any thoughts, make sure to drop them in the comments for either the YouTube upload or official Instagram post about this episode. And like we mentioned, if you know any trivia or production notes, let us know there. If you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on the podcast app you're choosing. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and CastBox. And we are right on the money because my cat just woke up. So
perfect. When Lucy is over it, we end our recording.